Hi, this is Counselor Fikowski, and in this video we are going to cover periods 1 through 9 in preparation for the APUSH exam. This is not meant to be exhaustive, but again to highlight the key points. So let's get right into it. Period 1 is all about maize, aka corn. This is going to allow the Native Americans to remain permanent and really adapt to their surroundings. So Native Americans are going to use their resources, use the geography around them in terms of homes, in terms of culture. So keep in mind when we refer to Native Americans, we're referring to hundreds, if not thousands, of different tribes that are unique in their own way. Now, early contacts with the Spanish, we're going to have a new caste system. It is going to be racially diverse. So for example, you do have some mixing thanks to marriage. You'll have mestizos with Native American and Spanish blood. That's going to emerge. And you also have this early work system known as the encomienda system, which is very brutal and almost akin to slavery. And Las Casas is going to be instrumental in ending it. However, the replacement labor force is going to be slaves. Now, Native Americans, again, are going to be adapting to Europeans while trying to preserve their own autonomy. And also, we're going to see early interactions with North America, North America, Africa, and Europe in terms of exchange of goods and even disease such as smallpox, which will be responsible for wiping out Native Americans. So there's typically a chart on that, so just be aware. All right, period 2. The revolution is brewing in the mind, and French and the Dutch are going to be colonizing North America. They typically have good relations with Native Americans. Spanish, again, in between, if you consider the encomienda system. English, not so much. You don't see any cross marriages. You don't see much in terms of trade. You just see a lot of war, such as the Pequot War. But we do have diversity in some of the English colonies, particularly in the middle colonies. In the northern colonies, when you saw Plymouth, for example, you had families. In the south, you really had individuals looking to strike it rich, hence if you consider Jamestown. Now, we do have early seeds of self-government, as you see here. Salutary neglect is the most important, where the colonies are sort of left to their own devices as England is fighting different wars and embroiled in different conflicts. As long as the colonies are remaining loyal in terms of payment, they are free to sort of govern themselves, and gives them a taste of self-government. So again, you have some other examples here, but the reason why England is invested in these 13 colonies, it's all about mercantilism. It's all about making money, and this is what we see through through the Navigation Acts. And in terms of Jamestown, again, our first permanent colony, we do see the use of Native Americans. That's not going to work too well. Then that's going to transition to indentured servants. That also doesn't work well. And then you're going to see the introduction of slaves. But you do have religion in the colonies. Consider Lord Baltimore in Maryland, John Winthrop with Puritans in New England, also founding with William Penn in Pennsylvania. All right, let's get into period 3. Period 3's turning point is all about the 7 Years' War, where Great Britain is now going to be demanding payment as a result of quote-unquote protection. Now, there is that desire to expand beyond the Appalachian Mountains. Colonists are prohibited from doing that, so they are upset about that. But again, it's all about mercantilism, and they are forced to pay for the war, the 7 Years' Wars, but these various acts here. Now, Thomas Paine, through his influential pamphlet of Common Sense, is going to argue many reasons as to why England should not be controlling these 13 colonies. So you have early resistance here through the First and Second Continental Congress, but boycotts being the primary method amongst many others. Now, don't get bogged down in various different battles. Just know some of these important ones, such as Trenton, as well as Saratoga being the turning point with the French coming in, and then Yorktown ending it. Now, I would also be familiar with Washington's farewell address with his warnings to avoid political parties and avoid sectionalism, but of course all of that is going to be ignored. Now, our first constitution is going to be the Articles of Confederation, and that's going to place most of the power in the hands of the state. That's not going to work, as exposed by the Shays Rebellion, and this is going to be replaced by our new U.S. Constitution that we love today. Now, also in period 3, we'll see the first rise of factions or political parties, Federalists versus Anti-Federalists, so Federalists wanting more power with the national government as opposed to Anti-Federalists. But as Washington warned us to avoid, sectionalism, this is going to emerge, and you're going to see some of these issues also happening early on under John Adams, XYZ affair, Alien and Sedition Acts, and the Virginia Resolutions. Why do we care about this one? First act of nullification prior to the Civil War, one of several. All right, let's get into period 4. This is all about early nationalism versus sectionalism that's going to come about. These early SOTUS cases, just be familiar that this is going to strengthen the power of the national government. And under Jefferson, you know, he's very idealistic. This is not really fulfilled all that much, but the most popular thing that he's going to do during his presidency is going to be doubling in the size of the United States with the Louisiana Purchase. Least popular is going to be the Embargo Act, which is going to hurt the economy specifically in the Northeast. Now, when we get to the War of 1812, we are now under Madison. This is going to reaffirm U.S. independence. It's really important. We won the first war, and then the second one, that is definitely going to be a reaffirmation of that. Now, this is going to usher in a period of nationalism known as the Era of Good Feelings until the Panic of 1819. We also will have our first foreign policy with the Monroe Doctrine, keeping Europe out of the Western Hemisphere, but we also will see the emergence of slavery and sectionalism, so early on with the Compromise of 1820, the Virginia debates, as well as Turner's Rebellion. There is an early attempt to sort of patch the United States together with the American system under Henry Clay. That does not really lead to anything successful long term. But we do have Andrew Jackson, a man of the people, burned in the election of 1824 with the correct bargain. However, he will emerge in 1828. So under him, he hates the National Bank, thinks it's a tool of the rich, also is going to be known for the tariff abominations, threatening to even hang his own VP. Now, there is going to be anti-Jackson sentiment. That's going to be the rise of the Whig Party. The important thing here is that this is going to entrench the two-party system that we still have today. Also happening during period 4, transcendentalism, which is uniquely American, and we'll also see the rise of women's rights thanks to the Seneca Falls Convention. All right, period 5 is all about expansion. Many examples here. Polk has period 5 written all over it, 54-40 or fight. We also have the Oregon Trail, Mexican-American War, which is going to really include the southwestern portion of the United States today into the country. You also have the emergence of the Free Soil Party, which is going to take an anti-slavery stance for their own economic purposes. But do be familiar with many of these examples here that are going to add fire to this already big inferno that's occurring that's going to eventually lead to the Civil War. Now, short-term cause is going to be the election of 1860. Long-term causes, definitely all of these. And you have military strategy by the Union with the Anaconda Plan as compared to the Confederacies to sort of play defense. Be familiar with Antietam and Gettysburg, only that they are the turning points of the war. We'll also see the Emancipation Proclamation, which is going to allow these formerly slaves to now fight in the war. We're also going to see the tactic of total war in terms of just burning down the South and destroying it, and this is going to lead to Reconstruction. So Lincoln's early plan is the 10% plan. It is very benevolent to the South. Johnson is an obstacle to Reconstruction early on as well after Lincoln's assassination, and then once the radical Republicans take over, it is really punishing the South. We'll have those military districts. But we do have some good results. 13th through 15th Amendments, definitely know those. And the Freedmen's Bureau helping these former slaves transition into a life of freedom. Drawbacks, we see sort of slavery coming about through sharecropping and tenant farming. Doesn't look all that much different. And we'll see the end of Reconstruction with the election of 1876. All right, let's get into period 6. This is the rise of massive wealth. And we have our robber barons, if you look at them in a negative way, or captains of industry, if you look at them in a very positive way. So be familiar with these captains of industry or robber barons and the gospel of wealth, saying by Carnegie how this money should be spent by these multi-millionaires. We do see the rise of early unions through collective action, so be familiar, such as with respect to the Rangers, with the farmers, also with the American Federation of Labor, for example. We also have some early labor action, but do note that the federal government is going to be on the side of capitalists. Now, there will be the Sherman Antitrust Act that tries to rein in these monopolies. That really is not going to have much teeth until we get to Wilson. We also have Boss Tweed and political machines in the city areas. We also have this period 2 during period 6, where we just have less than magnificent 7 presidents. Nothing really of significance happens until we really get to Teddy Roosevelt. We also have some anti-immigration, thanks to the Chinese Exclusion Act, Gentlemen's Agreement. But keep in mind some of the reasons why immigrants are coming to the United States, and that's what we refer to as the push, literally pushing them out of the country or pulling them, gravitating to the United States. We do have the Populist Party, which fails miserably, specifically in the election of 1896. However, the big idea here is that they are going to set the agenda for the progressive era that we'll see in period 7. So period 7 is all about the rise of imperialism. So we'll see the annexation of Hawaii. We'll also see the Spanish-American War that's going to be fought. And there are different foreign policy approaches. We have the Roosevelt corollary. We have Taft's dollar diplomacy. We also have Wilson's moral diplomacy. So keep those in mind. With our progressive era, this is really brought in by muckrakers, these investigative journalists who are exposing corruption, unsanitary conditions in factories. And so you have Roosevelt's Square Deal. You'll also have the Clayton Antitrust Act, which is going to strengthen the Sherman Antitrust Act. You also have the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendments. You also have state-level legislation that is progressive, such as referenda, initiatives. So this happens also at the state level, not just the national level. And of course, conservation with national parks. However, African Americans are left out of the progressive era. We see this through the Booker T. Washington versus Du Bois debate. And then once World War I emerges, the U.S. tries to stay out of it, but eventually is going to be pulled in. And we see the infringement of American civil liberties through the Espionage and Sedition Acts, the Schenck Supreme Court case. And then following the end of World War I, we see a push through the 14 points by Wilson to have the League of Nations established. That does not work. But when we get into the 1920s, also anti-immigration here, the fear of communism, the first Red Scare. We also have prohibition, which is going to be a complete train wreck. Now, our Republican presidents here really back to business. It's almost like laissez-faire 2.0, the Gilded Age 2.0, and we'll have the Great Depression being ushered in with Hoover sort of saying, hey, self-reliance, whereas we're going to see FDR really bring the national government up to speed. More government intervention here. Now, there are some obstacles to the New Deal. We do have some critics here saying that doesn't go far enough. Some say it goes too far. And then you also have FDR's attempted court packing plan, very controversial here. But FDR does diversify the Democratic Party with respect to unions, the Black Cabinet, and also helping with the help and the assistance of Eleanor Roosevelt, who is his eyes and ears. Now, with World War II, again, the U.S. tries to stay out of it. It's not going to be until Pearl Harbor that brings us in. And again, you don't need to know these battles, but again, just be familiar with its importance at home. Of course, the development of the atomic bomb, and a lot of diverse contributions from Native Americans, Mexican Americans, and women that have long-term implications here. All right, let's get into period 8. Now, various policies here. The whole idea, depending from after World War II up until about the 1990s, is all about containment. This idea that you have to contain communism, almost like a contagion, like COVID, if you will, and various approaches by different presidents here. Now, we do have the Korean War, which is our first real Cold War, not against the USSR. We'll never go to war with them, but keep in mind that this is over communism. So we do have it throughout the world. We have examples in Latin America. We also have the Cold War at home, if you think about it, with HUAC, investigating communism that supposedly exists within government employees. We'll also have the Vietnam War, which is huge to know. Gulf of Tonkin resolution bringing the U.S. into it. And then some unpopular examples here that lead to anti-Vietnam sentiments. But we do have some thaws here. Nixon in China, Nixon's Vietnamization, SALT 1 and 2, trying to, ease relations here. Reagan is going to make it a little bit, take a tougher approach on Gorbachev with his evil empire speech. We'll also see heavy investment in military spending thanks to Star Wars and other events just to be familiar with. OPEC, Iranian hostage crisis, as well as the Iran-Contra affair, most damaging to Reagan. Now, also in period 8 at home, we have the GI Bill helping these veterans transition after World War II, with Levittown being our first suburbs and a lot of conformity and growth specifically in the Southwest. We have a lot of defense spending, especially in education, NASA, and under LBJ, huge investment in domestic programs, anti-poverty with Great Society. We also have a lot of anti-Vietnam protests. Consider Kent State Massacre, the SDS, distrust of the government, Pentagon Papers, Nixon with the Watergate scandal, as well as the War Powers Act, all really highlighting that. Civil rights, boycotts, once again, being really important. Do be familiar with the Brown v. Board of Education case here. Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act is going to lead to a surge of people being registered to vote. And of course, you have Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, use of sit-ins, and there are different approaches here, whether you're part of Freedom Summer, CORE, SNCC, or even just considering, Malcolm X's following as to how to approach this more with peace and civil disobedience, or with really more direct action in violence. So again, that does split. This does lead to other movements such as the gay rights movement, women's rights movement, Native Americans' rights, as well as Hispanic Americans. So you do see these byproducts here. Now, by the time we get to the 1970s, we do have stagflation happening under Carter, as well as Ford, and then you will also briefly have an oil crisis, which will lead to the election of Ronald Reagan. With Ronald Reagan, it's all about Reaganomics. It's all about more supply side economics, in which you're having cutting inefficiency and waste in the government. You're also transferring some of the responsibilities to the states from the federal government. And also you bring a religious aspect to this with the moral majority. So we do see that being ushered in under Reagan. H.W. Bush, Persian Gulf War, again, a brief resurgence, but again, the United States is not tied down into a decade-year war. By the time we get to Clinton, we have trade agreements with NAFTA, we have welfare reform acts, and the dot-com bubble, so just be familiar with that, with George W. Bush, of course, September 11th, and then the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq. You can even add in the Great Recession, which will fall through under Obama as well, and you will see the nationalization of the Affordable Care Act with health insurance, and of course Obama having Osama bin Laden being killed under his watch as well. So I would not be too familiar or worry too much about in terms of period 9 when you're talking about Trump or Biden, because a lot of this is really not going to be focusing on current events. So there you have periods 1 through 9, and best of luck in your studying of this exam.